first, I wanted to thank both of you for completing what I call the unholy trinity of serial killers. You had Dahmer, Evan Peters as Dahmer. You had Zac Efron as Bundy, and now Michael as Gacy. So I wanted to thank you guys for that. And I wanted to ask, right, how did you decide on Michael for Gacy?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you very, very much for taking the time to sit with us.
Of course.
Secondly, I'll say that when this show was first coming to the fore with Peacock and Universal, they asked me to meet a lot of people. But once I saw Michael's name on the list, we were in the writers' room at the time, and so I was like looking at this thing with the writers, and literally it was like 100%. We all go, oh, it's him, but we hadn't met. And so part of, because again, his body of work, his talent is unassailable, and we are so lucky to have both of those things. But the other piece of the puzzle is whether or not you want to spend all day with someone for months on end. And that's part one. And we met, and that was immediate. He's just a decent, wonderful, funny human being that I have a great deal of fun with. And then part two is would he be down for the direction of the show and the vision of the show, where from the very beginning, we weren't showing any of the murders. That was a hard red line that was drawn. Part two is that we were really focusing it on the victim families, the police, the lawyers, and then ultimately the victims' stories. And that meant that I needed a partner who understood that and who appreciated it and who wanted to jump in the pool with me. And again, from the very beginning to right this moment with us sitting together, Michael has just been an extraordinary partner of mine. And I hope at some point in time he'll also call me a friend, but we're not there yet, I don't think. I'm a great friend. I don't know.
You're my best friend.
Aw.
Oh, we have to cancel this guy. This interview's over. We need to leave. We're gonna go. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I actually, it's funny because my next question was, you Gacy is this duality of man, right? Like you have this guy who's super chill, very manipulative, trying to get his way. So I wanted to ask Michael, how were you able to toe that line? Obviously, you have the writing at your disposal. I'm assuming incredible directing based on what I've seen so far. Well, how are you able to toe that line of serial murderer of young boys and then come across in the interviews as so chill? I know that Gacy did that in real life, so I'm just curious what you did in order to hone in on that.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think that was the key to the character all along. I mean, I will say all of it was in the writing. I feel like the writers did such an incredible job of capturing Gacy's very unique way of speaking, his kind of like folksy way of using words and often misusing words. Thing I love in episode 1 is he says, instead of saying he has an affinity for clowns, he says he has an infinity for clowns. And so that kind of just sort of like goofy, folksy, Midwestern kind of way of speaking was one way in. But then realizing how compartmentalized he was and almost like bifurcated, that there were these different personalities, that was really helpful for me to know that I could just play a version of him in any given scene. And maybe the mask would drop for a second and you'd see the evil guy behind it. But that often I was playing like multiple characters within an episode.
Right. Yeah, I remember watching the documentary where it talks about, I remember he's getting interviewed by someone and they're like, you just got to watch it again. And then you can see the signs or the telltale signs that he's lying, right? So I'm curious, so how was the research phase of this and how long was that? What did you guys do? Did you guys watch interviews? Did you guys watch the documentary? How did that all go?
So at the beginning, it was just me. I was all alone. But I had an extraordinary amount of support from NBC News. So, because it was obviously we're based on the documentary, which is a phenomenal documentary.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, the amount of research that came out, like that people didn't make it to the documentary, is extraordinary. So we had a great foundation from NBC News. And then I have a lovely, lovely gentleman that I've worked with for years who's a private researcher. and he went off and did a whole other deep dive, up to and including going to Chicago and digging through all of the evidence. He was given permission to go through all of the evidence. He even held Kim Byers' photo receipt that was in Rob Peace's pocket. He held it in his hands. He sent me a photo of it. And so between NBC News, Patrick, that's his name, Patrick, and our own, and reading a whole bunch on our own, myself, the writers, we really we even had, sorry, just to answer something that he said, we had an entire document that Patrick put together that was an analysis of the dialect of Chicago, and specifically how Gacy spoke. It was a breakdown of how Gacy spoke. So we even had that as a means of us trying to craft the language of the show. It all begins with research. It's one of the pleasures of doing my job, is that I get an opportunity to really do deep dives into these things that I wouldn't normally do.
Yeah. Okay. I have one last question. It looks like we're running out of time. So my last question for both of you is, you've already touched on the that you didn't want to disrespect the victims, and you wanted to really not, you didn't want to show the murders, and you wanted to just focus on the families and the loss that they had endured. So my question to both of you is, what is your message, one, for the overall show, and then two, for Gacy specifically, Gacy's character? What do you want the audience to take away after watching
For Gacy in particular, I just feel like there's nothing redeeming about this man. So anybody who, is sort of intrigued by him, or thinks he's this interesting cult figure, or wants to own one of his paintings, I would just say, don't do it. I mean, he was a despicable, evil human being, and he doesn't deserve your adulation or your fandom. And then the other thing I would say, in terms of like honoring the legacy, there are still a few victims who are unidentified. So if you want to be interested in this case, and you want to put your energy towards true crime, help spread the word that Chicago PD is still actively trying to identify a few of these victims and finally give a name and a face to them. So put your focus there and stop thinking about clowns.
Patrick, do you have anything you wanted to?
No, that was a beautiful, beautiful answer. There's nothing to add.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much, and thank you for making this show as true to what actually happened as well. There's an array of not only misinformation, but just misrepresentation of the message of serial killers. And so I wanted to really thank you guys for really, one, putting the victims first, and two, focusing on the grief and the loss of the aftermath. And I think a lot of people are really going to appreciate this show overall. So both of you guys, great job, congratulations, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I just want to just say one thing based on what you just said, because you opened by saying that the holy trinity of serial killers, and you closed with the entire message of the show. And so I just want to say to you how much I appreciate the fact that you closed the way that you closed, because that is,
Thank you.
It's very easy to say it's this thing, when it's really what you just said. So you said it better than we could say it. Thank you.
My first question, well, I first wanted to say, you did a great job as the detective in the show, and you were especially showing your shock to finding these horrific crimes. And I wanted to know what the first, let's start with, how did you hear about the role, and what made you decide to say yes?
I was in Vancouver wrapping up season 2 of The Last of Us, about to go home.
Okay.
Excited to go home. And then my team called and said that Patrick Macnamus had written this role for me, had mentioned what the subject matter was. I was initially reluctant. I think we all were. I think you'll probably talk to the rest of them. They'll probably all say the same thing. But then I read the scripts and realized that he was truthful in what his intent was, and where his focus would be placed in the telling of our story.
Right.
And that definitely started leading me towards what would be a discovery, like a real true discovery of meaning for this whole thing. Like we you know, I started out, I tried to kind of give them every reason to say no, but they said yes. And I'm so happy. I'm so happy that we collaborated on this, because it really grew. It grew each week, and everything I was seeing on the monitor, I was just so proud. I was like, wow, this is quality in every sense, in every department, and we were only finding more and more meaning in the story as we were going through it.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to ask, follow up to that. There is a true story. So there's a lot of content. There's obviously um, the documentary that it's based on, and I wanted to know what research went into the role? Did you have to research specifically, like, uh, I'm not sure if your character is a real character in real life, or if it was made for the show, and did you have to,
Yeah.
if it was a real character, did you have to, you know, research that real person, and was it more
Yeah.
of working off a character or working off of this real life person?
Yeah, no, the Rafael Tovar is a real man.
Okay.
He now resides in Kerrville, Texas. He's originally from Crystal City, Texas. He was recruited. They were looking for bilingual cops back up in Chicago, and he moved up north to pursue that.
Gotcha.
He Our version of Rafael Tovar is a bit of an amalgam of several individuals. A lot of Dr. Stein is in there. A lot of Detective Kozenzak's experience is folded into the experience that I have in the show.
Yeah.
But he was the lead investigator on the case. Was a very kind of lead from among his group kind of person, as depicted in the show. He was there every day, digging with the rest of them. And as far as my research and how I developed what I was doing, we had made it very clear early on that we wouldn't consult the real individuals going in, just
Okay.
so that we can kind of keep our distance from the absolute facts, and really rely on, or just the subjective facts, I should say,
Yeah.
and rely on all the objective factual information that we had from our research, from the documentary, from the many documentaries, from the many texts that have been written about the case, and to use that as the structure. And then I think beyond that, on a personal level, I did relate to him. I come from Texas. He came from Texas. I know what it is to be, kind of be one of the few of who you represent in a larger environment.
Yeah.
And I really responded to just the images of him at that time. Most of the interviews he does, he's now well into his latter years, but when he was in the case, working on this case, those glasses he wore, those cool rose tint aviators, he had long, kind of rock star type hair. He didn't dress in a suit like every other detective. He wore the leather jackets and the rugby shirts and the blue jeans, and that's just kind of who he was. And so I just wanted to bring a little bit of that outsider mentality and that bit of kind of a cowboy kind of approach to it.
Yeah.
And that's and I think that serves the character, because he really was going against the grain and against the flow of traffic most times when he was doing his work.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question is gonna be really short. If you could summarize what you want people to get from your character in one sentence or from the show, what would that be?
I want people to identify and empathize with others, and those who aren't like you, and those who you think are on the outskirts and the margins of society.
Wow.
We should find the place in our hearts, and to always engage, and to bring us closer together. So in doing that, we're stronger as a community, we're safer as a community, and we're more caring.
So I'm a fan. I've seen you in a few of your things like Hell or High Water. So I wanted to first off just ask, well, first say congratulations for the show.
Thank you.
No problem. And my first question is, what, how did you hear about the role? What was your reaction to accepting it? And yeah, we'll just start there.
Michael Chernus and I have been friends for a very long time. We sort of
Okay.
started out at the same time in New York City and in the theater community doing plays together. And so he actually called me and reached out to me about the project once it kind of had come my way a little bit and was maybe moving along. And he reached out to me to tell me, make sure I knew that the way that this project was being made and the ethos behind it was really honoring the victims and their lives and wasn't kind of about anything kind of exploiting their deaths or Gacy himself and his mind and all of that stuff. So that was very reassuring to me. And he told me he didn't want to sign on to something like that otherwise. And when I spoke with Patrick Macnamus, it was a similar conversation about how respectfully the show is going to portray the victims and their lives. And that made it feel to me like there was a real purpose in making something like this. And I I could get on board with it. I didn't want to make something that was going to be treating these young men with disrespect or taking their lives lightly. So
Right.
that was what I wanted to be a part of.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's a very like common common theme that's kind of been going, especially with like serial killers and mass killers trying to honor the victims more than, you know, talking about the atrocities that happen, right? So what was your research? Did you know anything about your character, John Wayne Gacy, and how were you able to research your role?
Yeah, I only knew kind of broad strokes, honestly. And Patrick and the team had really assembled this extensive Dropbox of interviews and files and photos, and there wasn't much about the Peast family. There were a few photos and an article
Really?
or two, but they seemed to be very, very private. And I talked with Cricket Brown, who plays my daughter Carrie in the show, and um, she was sort of asking me about how I felt about that. And I said, I think it's actually incredibly generous because it means that we can also afford them some privacy. So our job isn't to try to recreate them exactly physically or to, bring details from their lives that they didn't want shared out into the light. So what I feel like we were able to focus on was I was just telling a story of the woman in the script who lost a child. And so I read a lot of books about people who lost children or experienced very sudden loss and thought about what that kind of grief can do over time. And I felt like that was the story I was trying to tell. And hopefully people who've experienced something like that would feel like their story was being reflected.
What do you feel is the overall message that you want people to get from your character? I know that you touched on trying to respect the victims and the fact that she lost her child. Did you want the role to focus more on how to get through and how to overcome?
Mm.
Or, well, I guess, you're just you're reading the script, but, you have your own interpretations of how to perform it. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how, like what direction you eventually decided to
Well,
go in.
I think to me, it was honestly about wanting to reflect back what a lifetime carrying that kind of grief can look like. Not even what it looks like for everybody, but and again, so also because I think people who carry this kind of grief, part of the story of that is that it doesn't progress in a particular way. And sometimes it feels like it just happened. So for me, it was just about trying to kind of tell that story about somebody who's living with this kind of grief over a long period of time and wanting to feel like it feels authentic to people who also have gone through that.
Absolutely. My I know that we're running out of time, so my last question for you is, I know it's kind of like a weird question because of the content of the show, but do you have like a like a memorable scene that you remember shooting that really stuck out to you, or like a favorite? I use favorite, like, but like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
very, you know what I mean? Like a memorable.
We the first scenes of the show, we actually shot near the end because of the
Okay.
season we were in, and so we actually shot the scene where the last time she sees Rob, which was her birthday. We shot it the anniversary, the day after the anniversary of that actual day. Um, I think it was 45 or 46 years later.
Yeah.
So the fact that it was the day after her birthday that we actually shot it, and it was at the end, near the end of the shoot for us. Uh, it was kind of, I think everybody on set felt a little like something special was happening, um, and we all felt very connected to the story that day. It was, and while it was one of the least sort of emotionally heavy days for me on camera because she didn't know it was the last time she was going to see him. It was one of the heaviest days on set because we all were just thinking about her and Rob and that moment.